Chapter 1 of Part 1. Mesopotamia, Western Greece. 98 years after the fall of Troy. Cornelius speaks. Troy fell when my sixth forefather was a youth, and thus consequently I had only ever known Trojans as slaves, a defeated, despondent people who I noticed merely as obedient drudges, creeping about my father's palace. I paid them little attention. They were but slaves after all. And moreover, they were the sorry remnants of a people who had caused my fellow Greeks much trouble and sorrow. It was not so much that I despised them, for I did not. It was just that they were a people who had caused their own misfortune, and who thus needed to have no sorrow, no pity, and certainly no hatred wasted upon them. So I paid them no regard. I spoke to them only to speak a request, and even that rarely, for my nurse and companion Tavia was the usual intermediary between my wants and those who lived only to attend them. And I occasionally nodded absent-mindedly at one or the other if they performed me a particular service. This was the entire limit of my involvement with Trojans. They were constantly about me, but they were all but invisible. I was Cornelia, only legitimate child of the great Pandrasus, king of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia was not a particularly noticeable city, I grant you, but it was important and rich enough, and was only one of the very few survivors of the catastrophe that had rocked our world for the preceding 6 or 7 generations. Other cities may have succumbed to conflagration and earth tremors, or to the swords and hate of the tribes who took advantage of the turmoil in the Aegean world to invade. But Mesopotamia continued, as if charmed, serene and safe on its tranquil bay on the northwestern coast of mainland Greece. There was only little contact with the outside world, and I existed virtually unaware of even the small degree of contact. There was my father who adored me, and there were the joys and pleasures of my father's court from which I rarely strayed. Why should I have? My father's palace contained everything I could have wanted. Everything was mine for the asking. Rare fabrics far from the far east, the most tempting of morsels from the kitchens, jewels as I wanted for my neck and arms, the admiration and attendance of all who beheld me. The last began to amuse me more and more, particularly once I passed my 14th birthday and became a woman. I was my father's heir, and whoever bedded and wedded me had not only my undoubted physical charms to enthrall him, but the throne as well. I taunted my male admirers, naturally. When my father held court in his Megaron, every man who had a desire for the throne, and that was most of them, allowed his eyes to stray to me. I would smile and straighten my shoulders, allowing them a full view of my breasts. We followed the old Minoan fashion here in Mesopotamia. One of my foremothers, much removed, had come from Crete, I believe, bringing the fashion with her. And all noble, unmarried girls displayed their breasts above their tight-waisted flounced skirts and between the flaring, stiffened lapels of their heavily embroidered jackets. I was glad that we still kept to this custom, for it gave me ample opportunity to tease and tantalize, watching all the while the lust for power, and for me, of course, flare in the eyes of men. Sorry creatures they were. I teased and I flaunted, but it was done only for trivial amusement. I had already secretly chosen my husband, my comely 16-year-old cousin Melanthus, and in that winter of my 15th year I fully intended to drive him to such distraction that he would not hesitate to take my virginity the instant I offered it to him. Then we could use my swelling belly to persuade my father that Melanthus was a good enough catch for me. It was irksome that he was but a third son, for I knew my father would despise that. But if I was caught with child, then my father would surely be so delighted he would deny me nothing. My life was full. It was good. It boded nothing but blessings. That is, it boded nothing but blessings until Hera spoke to me. Hera, most lovely of goddesses and queen to Zeus, had been my personal deity ever since I was old enough to choose one. To be sure, the power of the gods was a faint thing, or even a non-existent thing if I listened to Tavia, who had said that while the gods were now all but dead, many generations ago they had intervened in almost every aspect of mortal life, and had even the power to stop the sun and raise the seas. But Hera, at least, was a comforting if distant presence in my life. To her I confided all my secrets in the dark womb of the night when Tavia lay snoring at the foot of my bed. To her I recounted all the happinesses and intrigues of my day. To her I prayed, I begged, that Melanthus should be mine, and hopefully without any significant delay. She did not reply, of course, although occasionally I thought I felt such a soothing presence beside me that I believed her truly with me. She was my friend, and so it was, I presume, that as my friend, and even as weak as she was, Hera made that single stupendous effort to warn me of what approached. It was a night like any other. Tavia had made sure of the comfort, and then laid down on her pallet at the foot of my bed. Snores had soon issued forth from the darkness beyond my feet. The snores once had irritated me beyond measure, until I realized that they informed me of when the night was mine to confide either in Hera or in my dreams as intimately as I wanted. I lay quietly, a smile on my face, my hands on my breasts, as I thought of Melanthus. Tavia and her snoring would have to find somewhere else to sleep once he was my husband. In that thought, my smile increased, and I wriggled in my bed, a vague, unknowable wanting deep within my body making me restless. I was about to whisper Melanthus' name as a mantra. The more I spoke it, then surely the sooner he would be mine. When suddenly, I was no longer within my bed, nor even within my home. Instead, I stood on a blasted rock, the sea churning about me, drenching me with its waters. Above me wheeled immense black birds, screaming and shrieking so horribly I put my hands to my ears and cried out in terror. "Beware," spoke a voice. I spun about, almost losing my footing on the treacherous rock. A woman, wraith-like, so insubstantial the waves cascaded straight through her, stood a pace away at the very edge of the rock. "Who are you?" I whispered. The wraith reached out a hand, and as it neared my face, her flesh solidified so that warm flesh touched my cheek, and I knew instantly who it was. Hera. "Beloved child," she said. I saw in her newly fleshed face that her lovely eyes were awash with tears. "Beloved child, beware, for you have a great enemy." I put my hand over hers and pressed it more deeply against my cheek. "Hera," I whispered, so overcome with her presence I paid virtually no heed to her words. "Hera, a great enemy, the Horned One, Asterion. He will hunt you down one day, Cornelia. Be prepared." Asterion? The name was vaguely familiar, but I forgot anything I might have known about it. As the import of Hera's words finally sank into my consciousness. An enemy? And one who sounded so malevolent? My fear, initially comforted by the goddess's presence, now reasserted itself, and I sobbed. The bull, the Horned One. Keep watch for him, Cornelia. He hunts, and he will hunt you. What? What do you mean? Hera's other hand lifted, and for one blessed moment she held my face cradled between her two hands. You were so beautiful, she whispered, and I wondered that she, the most lovely of goddesses, could say this. So beautiful, and you must learn also to be strong and courageous, for nothing else will stop him. You could know. I am dying, and I am among the very last of my kind. I've not much longer before the waves of the catastrophe engulf me completely. Cornelia, listen. The game has been stolen from us, but it will find you again. When it does, my dear, learn it. Learn the game, child. Learn the game. It is all that can save you, and through you all of mankind. From Asterion. I had no idea what she meant. Hera, you shall meet a distant sister of mine, sad and weary, and damaged by Ariadne's viperish curse as well, but far more cunning than I, and whose well of power has not been destroyed as has ours. She will aid you. She is all that is left now. Her hands dropped away from my face. She stepped back, and her form became insubstantial once more. Hera, I cried, reaching out to her. Farewell, beloved, she whispered. Farewell. And she was gone. I woke, fully conscious, into the dark of my bedchamber. Tavia snored on, unperturbed. Asterion, I whispered. I lay awake a long time. The drowsiness overcame me, and I succumbed to sleep. I dreamed again, but it was of Melanthus, and its effect was such that when I woke into the bright daylight with Tavia bustling about the chamber, I remembered almost nothing of Hera's visitation. Within the month, what I would later recognize as Ariadne's curse reached out and overwhelmed me, and the catastrophe, finally, calamitously, lay waste to my entire life. And thus ends Chapter 1 of Part 1 of Hades' Daughter. Till next time.